Hi, it's Helen Tarrant. Welcome to another episode of Commercial Property Roadshow. You're here with Helen Tarrant, and today I'm actually going to talk about converting a residential property into a commercial property. Now, I get lots and lots of questions around this. What should you do? Should you even do it? Is it even worth doing it? And should you be looking at converting the residential to commercial straight away? What kind of tenants should you be getting in there? And that's what we're going to cover today on this video. So when you are looking at a residential property, the number one thing you actually need to determine is firstly whether it's in a zone to allow you to change into a commercial property. So sometimes if you're in a mixed zoning area or a commercial zoned area, you can still have residential property. So that could be that previously it was close to the town center. It's no longer, the town center has actually gentrified and expanded, and as such the streets around it have commercial zoning. Alternatively, they could be building a new school, a new university, a new hospital, and as a result they've rezoned the area. That's when your residential property starts to become more commercial like. So, or if you're looking for a commercial property and you happen to come across a residential property in a commercial zone, you can then look at converting the residential to a commercial property. So what are the steps you need to go through to assess if that's a good deal? Well, the number one thing is actually about rent. So the difference between residential property and commercial property is actually gross rent versus net rent. So say you're getting $500 a week in residential property, that's $500 a week. That's it. That's gross. That means that out of that you have to pay your council rates, you have to pay water rates, you have to pay your strata or building insurance depending on what the type of property you're buying, and any other miscellaneous outgoings you need to maintain that property. For some people it may have to include some cleaning if there is a couple of tenants in there, or mowing the lawn at the back for the tenant, depending on the arrangement you come with the tenant. So your $500 per week gets eroded pretty fast, and it can often cost you anywhere between $50 to $80 to actually maintain that property, and so you're not really positive with that investment. But if you were buying a commercial property or converting that residential to a commercial property, then possibly that $500 gross becomes $500 net. So all of a sudden you're getting anywhere between a 30 to 40% increase on your rent, because now all your strata or building insurance, your rates and water, any of that maintenance cost, all of that sudden gets shifted to the tenants column. So what that means is that all of a sudden what you get in your pocket is net, and what you need to pay the bank, and afterwards you actually have money left over. So it's a positive proposition or positive cash flow property. So yay. So sometimes that is a good enough reason for you to change from a residential property to a commercial property. And that's really about getting the right tenant in there, getting a commercial tenant in there rather than a residential tenant. But also the characteristics of the property has to change. And that's something you have to factor in to see if it's worthwhile for the change and whether that's actually going to create an increase in the value of your property. So the number two thing when you consider changing a residential to a commercial is the increased value of the property. So do you then go ahead and spend $20,000, $30,000 or $40,000 on that property after you've just bought it to convert it into a commercial tenant or commercial property? So that may include, a lot of the times it includes getting rid of the laundry and getting rid of the bathrooms. Often there's showers and bathtubs and things like that. There's troughs and laundries, often just stripping that away, making that a little storage room, making it a normal bathroom, or converting the bathroom into a disabled bathroom. The other thing is about access. So you might have a very narrow doorway for residential. You might need a bigger doorway for commercial, especially if you want disability access as well. It might require you to build a ramp into the property rather than just stairs, depending of course where the level of the property is. Of course then the room layout also got to change. So you can't just have a kitchen that's just in the middle of the lounge area. You maybe need to shift the kitchen, change it into a kitchenette at the back. You may need to get rid of the kitchen altogether. So there's many areas you need to change in that property to change the layout of it so that it becomes a commercial property. And of course there's also compliance issues with of course things like fire, and also just bring it up to make sure that all the works are being done and up to the code, the commercial code. So that's the number three thing, is to look at how much it costs for you to get the compliance of that. So it's not just we're converting and spending that whole chunk of money, but the compliance of it. And then ultimately it all comes down to numbers and the equation of, is it worthwhile for you to get a commercial tenant in there, and does that increase the value of your property? So we come back to number 1 and 2. So let's say you bought a property for $500,000, and then you decided that yes, it's worth you spending $50,000, or 10% of the money you've used to purchase the property. So $50,000 to convert it from residential to commercial. So then what you potentially want to do is to look at the ratio of not only getting $500 if you were renting this property out as residential, but that potentially if you became a commercial premise, you could rent that property out for a minimum of $750 net. So it's not only just an increase of 20% in terms of net and gross changes, but actually a significant increase on top of that. So another 50% increase on top of that to get the commercial tenant. So you're going from a mum and dad living in your property to now having a potential dentist, an allied health like a chiropractor or a physio in there, or you could have someone who's operating a professional service like financial planners also, and accountants and lawyers love also these kind of properties as well. And of course there's also beauty therapy and retreats, studios, like there's lots and lots of uses for it. But the main thing is, will you attract a sticky tenant in there that's going to pay you a higher level rent? Because if you ended up getting a tenant that's going to pay you $750 net rent, then you are going to end up with somewhere around $35,000 in net rent, or to $40,000 in net rent, plus all your outgoings paid, and you've got a tenant that's there for 3-5 years on a longer lease. So that becomes worthwhile, and you only spent $50,000 in converting the property and attracting the tenant. So your $500,000 property, you've now ended up spending plus the $50,000, you end up spending $550 for it. But now because you're getting somewhere around $35,000-$40,000, the uplift to that property is now, your property is now worth anywhere from $650,000 to $750,000, depending on the market yield at the time, or the cap rate in the market that you are operating in and where you're buying. And that would be the proposition of why you would convert a residential to a commercial. So the 3 things to look at: number 1 is rent. What is the increase you're going to get in rent between a gross rent having a residential tenant to the net rent in a commercial tenant? And it has to be a minimum of 20 to 30% for it to be worthwhile to start with, but preferably a lot more than that. Preferably we're looking more at 60 or 70% as a better proposition. Secondly, the capital work you're going to put into it increase in terms of the value the property is going to be. So if you're spending $50,000 or $100,000 in terms of the conversion, is it ultimately going to give that back to you and double? So does that bring in an extra $100,000 or $150,000 equity into the property? So that's the number 2 thing. Number 3 is really about compliance. Can you get the tenant in? What kind of compliance do you need to do in terms of fire, in terms of if you're going to get disability access, in terms of any of the layout of that you need to do, all of those things, and how much is that going to cost you? And of course, you would need to consider insurance and things like that as well. So all of those things need to be considered. So those are 3 things, and if they add up, and you're in an area that's gentrifying, it's changing, the value of that property will go up, because it is a very flexible property, and there's a lot of tenants who are looking specifically for that type of property because it's friendly, it's homely, it doesn't feel like you're in an office space, and also it allows them to have functionality and also parking. So there's a lot of good upsides to it, and that's the reason why people often choose that, and they may pay a little bit more than just an office space to be in that premise. So really look at those 3 metrics before you decide whether you want to buy a residential property and convert it to commercial. So I hope that's been helpful. If you want more information about it, or if you want me to assess your current situation, or you just want some advice, or you want me to take you through a personalized strategy session and really help you on your commercial property journey, go to helentarrant.com, send me a message through there, or helen@commercialpropertycashflow.com.au. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.